Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Israel security forces have received the remains of 3 hostages from Gaza and have also been identified as Asaf Hamami, Oz Daniel, Omer Neutra. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has stated that the bodies were handed over via the Red Cross to IDF and Shin Bet units inside Gaza and will undergo forensic identification as well. The transfer has come as both Israel and Hamas are accusing each other of violating the truce, although the ceasefire has largely halted 2 years of fighting. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has stated that the Gaza ceasefire is not fragile and has warned that Hamas could be taken out immediately if they don't behave. That's exactly what he stated, and I have quoted. Trump has also stated that the United States would be involved in Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's corruption trial in order to help him out, calling the Israeli leader a friend who's been treated unfairly. With us on the broadcast is Sasha Mashta, political commentator, joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. After the debacle we saw earlier with the bodies that were handed over not belonging to the hostages itself, what do you make of this new move by Hamas to send 3 new bodies who've been identified as Asaf Hamami, Oz Daniel and Omer Neutra? Of course, the forensic confirmation is remaining.
So yeah, thanks for having me back on the channel. It's a pleasure. And since the beginning of the ceasefire, Hamas has been constantly violating the 72-hour period that they had to return all the bodies of the hostages. They've been slowly drip-dropping bodies of hostages, where each few days they'd release a new body, and even wrong bodies that do not belong to the hostages that were remaining in Gaza. They returned the remains of a Gazan body. They returned the bodies of a hostage that was supposed to be returned in 2023. So they've been making all kinds of purposeful mistakes and playing all sort of games to test the limits of this ceasefire. And fortunately, Israel and the mediators and the United States have responded by pressuring Hamas and by making it clear that the bodies must be returned, that Hamas must return all of the bodies. And we've seen that this pressure is effectively working as Hamas continues to release the last bodies of the hostages. We expect that the 3 bodies released yesterday were in fact belonging to 3 Israeli hostages, and that would leave the count to 8. So all the pressure must be put for Hamas to continue to release these bodies and to meet their requirement that should have been met after 72 hours that the ceasefire came into effect.
Indeed, and we've seen a rather strong statement from Donald Trump as well. He stated that the ceasefire is not fragile and that Hamas could be taken out immediately if they don't behave. What does this indicate? Does this perhaps indicate that Donald Trump would leave it to Israel to do so, or would this also include, hypothetically, the involvement of American troops?
I think American troops is definitely off the table, but this is the genius of the President Trump plan. It didn't set a single timeline for Hamas's disarmament. It didn't set a timeline, or it didn't say how it will happen. It means that one way or another, Hamas will disarm. This is clearly stated in the Trump plan, and this was accepted by the whole Middle East, the whole world, in fact. So that's Trump's greatest achievement, which was not only releasing all the living hostages and giving Israel and removing Hamas's leverage, because the living hostages and the hostages were Hamas's main leverage that were causing the war to continue for so long. But at the same time, it created a situation where that Israel got the hostages back, but also Hamas must disarm, was clearly agreed to by everyone. So it now comes how Israel and how the United States will be willing to enforce this deal. Israel doesn't want to return to war. Israel has had 2 years of a bloody war, where the evaluation of war, because it's not a positive thing for Israel to be in a war and internationally isolated and all the consequences that come with war. So Israel prefers for this to be done diplomatically through other levers and through international pressure, especially through Hamas's patrons, Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt. So it's going to be up to the United States and Israel to see how they pressure Hamas to disarm. And I think it's just a question of when, not if, because if there's a clear determination to get this done, then there are many ways to do it, and military is always the last option. So Hamas must be put in a situation where they see no choice but to disarm by will and not by force.
Indeed, and I also wanted to touch upon another statement Trump has put out. He's backed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the current corruption trial that he faces. He's claimed that Netanyahu is being treated unfairly and that the United States will do what it can. What do you make of this very public support that Trump is providing Netanyahu in his domestic troubles? And what sort of precedent would it set if the US does decide to help Netanyahu in Israel's internal judicial processes?
So we all heard Trump's comments at the Knesset as well, where he floated the subject of a pardon. This has actually been a much wider and much longer issue that's been going on through Israel and dividing Israeli and polarizing Israeli politics and society. Israelis don't want to be seen as another vessel of the United States. They don't want to be seen as a 51st state. But at the same time, Israelis really appreciate and are truly grateful for President Trump and his administration for their staunch support of Israel. So we see this as a way of maybe thanking Prime Minister Netanyahu for his work during this war and during this ceasefire and plan. And Trump's not really explaining how the United States is going to intervene. It's more of a vague statement and floating the possibility without giving any steps or a concrete plan. So we could take this as some way of publicly rewarding or praising Netanyahu and sort of a little political win, but I don't think that the United States will necessarily get involved. But that being said, what it could cause is a situation where the President Herzog would pardon Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is something that's been floated as well in the past weeks.
Yes.
So we have to see, but I don't see the United States truly getting involved in Israel's judicial system because, as we said, most Israelis, we don't want to be subject to the United States.
Absolutely. I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking some further updates. We're now learning that US President Donald Trump has stated that he thinks that Saudi Arabia is going to join the Abraham Accords. Trump has rejected Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's recent assertion that Saudi Arabia would not join the Abraham Accords without a two-state solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. Trump has stated that he does not believe that Saudi will insist on Palestinian statehood to normalize ties with Israel. Let's in fact listen in to what the US president has said.
Ask you about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is coming to the White House this month. He has said they won't join the Abraham Accords without a two-state solution. Do you believe that?
No, I think he's going to join. I think we will have a solution. I don't know if it's going to be two-state. That's going to be up to Israel and other people and me. But look, the main thing is you could have never had any kind of a deal if you had a nuclear Iran. And you essentially had a nuclear.
Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Sasha Mashta, political commentator. Interesting statement coming in from Donald Trump because we've recently seen Saudi Arabia coming out and denying that it will be a part of the Abraham Accords, the landmark agreement that was linked about 4 to 5 years back. However, the situation then when 4 countries did decide to ink these accords was quite different. You had a more assertive Iran in the region, which has now been considerably weakened after the war between Israel and Iran and the consequent US strikes on 3 of its nuclear facilities as well. Then what incentive does Saudi Arabia have to join the Abraham Accords?
Yeah, so first of all, Saudi Arabia has been floating the possibility of joining the Abraham Accords for some time now. And October 7th attacks, in fact, were a way that Iran was planning to, one of the many reasons was that Iran was planning to halt or suspend these Israeli negotiations with the Saudis that seemed closer than ever. But the Saudis have their own problem, their own domestic problem with the Muslim Brotherhood. They've been working years and years for removing this terror organization from their land, and it's been quite a process. So that has to be said when analyzing statements put out by the Saudis. it might not always reflect what's actually going on, because they have a population that might be hostile, that might be more hostile to Israel, and that might really carry the torch of the Palestinian cause. So it's not a popular statement, and it's very fragile domestic politics where they could just cozy up to Israel and expect no public backlash. So what incentives might Saudi have? Well, first of all, it's of course the Iran threat. The Saudis saw with their own eyes that Israel took care of the Iranians, that Israel single-handedly with the United States removed an existential threat to Israel, an immediate existential threat, which was the nuclear capabilities, but also diminished their missile capabilities. And the Saudis know better than anyone that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror, and that Iran is a great force of chaos and bloodshed in the Middle East. So they wanted to see, they were waiting to see whether Israel could handle it, because if Israel can't handle Iran, if Israel were not able to confront Iran, then Israel might not be the viable partner that the Saudis need in the region to confront this threat. The Saudis have had problems with the Houthis, the Saudis have had problems with the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's all related to Iran stirring up conflict in the Middle East. So the success of the negotiations for Saudi to join the Abraham Accords, one factor is going to be, of course, Israel's response to Iran, which I think was a positive one, and it's a optimistic sign. It's also going to be what levers Trump is going to be able to use, what levers Trump is going to be able to use to negotiate with the Saudis, because we know that Trump has a very transactional negotiating style, which could eventually lead to peace with the Saudis. And one more thing that this is going to depend on is, of course, the end of the war and the ceasefire holding.
Indeed, we do know that back-channel diplomacy does take place. Intelligence sharing also takes place. But apart from security concerns that the Saudis have, there is, of course, an elephant in the room, that is their imaging in not just domestically, but in the Arab world, the Muslim world at large. Do you think they're factoring this in as well, and this is sort of also prompting their hesitance to joining the Abraham Accords at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. We know that the Saudis, they want to be that superpower in the Middle East, and to be so, the image matters. So I think that the Saudis will only join this peace if they see Israel as a strong, viable partner.
All right, with that, I would like to thank you, sir, for taking out time, of course, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in Syria and Lebanon.